You are now listening to the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer and author of the best-selling book, Stay the Course, Don Brightman. And you're going to be getting some goodies today from the guest that's up next. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as the Going North podcast, we got another super special, awesome human for you today, my friends. That's right, indeed. If you thought Helen Brennan appearing on the show a while back was horse wisdom, well, my goodness, we're back at you again with some more horse wisdom, because my goodness, today's guest in particular is an international, you heard that right, folks, international animal communicator who holds private sessions addressing clients' questions to pets, and she's also a fellow podcast host. She also hosts her own wonderful show on the Dream Visions network called Animal Connections on the Dream Visions 7 radio network that explores the profound revelations of our shared lives with beloved pets. So let's give it up for Miss LR herself, the wonderful, lovely, and radiant Laura Rowley. How you doing today, Laura?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good indeed.
Good.
That's right.
Thank you for having me today.
Oh yeah, that's right. We have all the plums today because it's plum pleased and pleasure to have you. Another wonderful author from the Mayhem to Miracles. That's right.
I was fortunate to be asked to contribute to that lovely book, Mayhem to Miracles, Miracles to Mayhem. It's about the transition and the transformation that we go through, well, when we go through hard times or difficult passes in our lives, how we can use tools like faith, hope, love to transform something that feels like mayhem, something that feels truly awful, into something that feels miraculous, whether for us or for other people involved in the tale, or even for humanity. Little tiny miracles, big miracles, it doesn't really matter. The book kind of traverses different people's interpretation of what mayhem felt like to them and how they used hope, love, faith to move forward through it and heal something deep inside the situation that became miraculous. So it's your own definition of miraculous. So anyway, I was asked to contribute, and I felt so fortunate to do so. I'm a professional animal communicator, which means that on a daily basis, I have the privilege for sure and the pleasure to be a part of people's transformation, in that I help them understand what their animal is trying to convey to them. So when I say their animal, I don't know how to politically correctly say their animal, their pet, their cat, their dog, their horse, their pony. It could be their mouse. I've talked to turtles, I've talked to gerbils, and all of those beings communicate in a different manner, but it's a significant form of communication any way you look at it. It may not be linguistically human, sentences, paragraphs, that sort of thing. Most animals speak in feelings. They send ideas through their feelings. And some animals, the ones that have more connection with humankind, like that live with us or have been trained by us, they also send pictures, like little movies of how the experience felt to them or what it looked like from their perspective. So it's a language, but it's more like the language of dreams. How we have a dream. We think, oh, I saw a picture of myself, in a lake. Well, was the lake calm and smooth, or was the lake rocky, or was the wind blowing? Was it dark? A little picture tells a lot, the little tiny details. Or was it serene and turquoise blue, and you were laying on a, placid feeling, floating on the lake, or were you, paddling around, drowning on the lake, right? So that's an idea of a dream that we would have. So animals seem, or my brain's interpretation of what animals seem to do is they seem to have dreamlike visions that they send to one another. It's how they talk to each other when they're in groups. And they speak to me in this way. So when I asked them a question about some sort of interface that they had with their human phones me and is upset about something, typically. So my job is to take that dream and interpret it so that everybody leaves the session feeling like they understand each other. And maybe there's a sense of communion or a compromise that can be reached so that maybe our dreams mesh with their dreams a little better. For instance, a good example of this would be I recently had a conversation with a young woman, and she got her dream horse. It was something she wanted to do her whole life. It was not obtainable most of her life. So the horse arrives, it's well trained, gift from her husband, super excited, and wanted to do this for 30 years. And the horse was a lunatic and couldn't concentrate and screamed and ran in circles. And she was afraid to actually even approach the horse, let alone maybe do the dream life she thought with the horse, which would have been go for trail rides and have pastoral, conversations and sit on the horse and relax. And so the horse was frightening, really. So she asked me to tune into the horse, whose name happened to have been Daisy. And Daisy said that she had always been with one person her whole life and showed me this very beautiful dream on her part of consistency and love and a feeling of home. And that had been disrupted because apparently Daisy's original family divorced. They had to sell Daisy. She went to several homes until she ended up with this woman so now Daisy just doesn't know where home base is. She's frightened. She thinks she's on her way out, headed to yet another place. And that's the one thing I've found that humans and animals really share is that need for a place that they call home. What is home base? What makes us feel secure? What makes us feel like we belong, And so when animals get shuffled around, even if it's for really well-intentioned reasons and for really well-intentioned people end up with them, sometimes they're just so scrambled in that sense of security that they can't calm down. Their flight or fight responses are just throbbing, so they can't focus on anything. And I would say a lot of my clients are in the middle of some form of that transition, especially now after COVID, when so many animals and people, we've all been displaced in so many ways, whether in our work lives, our personal lives, and then all the animals that we couldn't keep, we wanted to keep, we went to the shelters and took. It's kind of a big stew of a lot of people and animals adjusting. And so it's interesting because it's not just the animal that's going through the change, but you're also going through the change. So in this case, with this woman, Daisy's person's name was Kathy. And I said to Kathy, you're not really trusting this relationship is going to work. And she said, well, how can I? I can't even get near Daisy. I'm afraid of her. And this was my dream come true. And I said, well, if in any relationship, you have to open your heart and decide to try. You don't go out on a date with somebody you think you might like and decide you're not going to even look at them or, sit across the restaurant from them. You have to sit there and be vulnerable and ask questions and open your heart. And I said, you're not doing that because you're scared of her, and she's not doing it because she's scared you're going to kick her out, and you're about to kick her out because you're scared of her. So I said, somebody has to go first in the vulnerability department. And how did Kathy feel about it being Kathy first? And Kathy said, oh boy, she said, you nailed me. She said, I am scared this way because what if I really don't deserve this dream called a horse? She said, only privileged people get this. And, do I deserve that? And I said, well, of course you do. It's in your backyard. Like, let's talk about that. It's deservability. So often we start to get what we want, and then we're a little afraid of what we asked for because it starts to happen. And so she and I processed that a bit. And then we talked to Daisy, and I said, Daisy, you've got to try. This woman has opened her life to you. And, you have to realize that she wants you to stay here forever. And you got to let go of that old stuff. And then I, really kept repeating the idea that I think Daisy most needed to hear is you're home now. You're home now. You're home now. And just, when you hear me say that to you now speaking, it makes you feel differently, doesn't it? It calms you down. Like, we're always home. We're always home wherever we are, but we kind of all forget that. We think something has to be different or a place has to be different. And so when I kept reminding Daisy of that and told her that, a new day was dawning, Kathy was going to try differently, she needed to try differently. I made some suggestions over some supplements that she could discuss with her veterinarian that would maybe have a calming effect on the nervous system, to kind of help with the transition. And off I sent them. So that was a kind of typical half an hour for me out of my workday.
Yeah, another day in the office, another day in the office. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So, what led you to discover the gift of being able to communicate with animals and find out that they actually communicate through dreams and emotions? Like, what led you to that discovery?
Well, that was a journey for sure that I would have never expected of myself. I was raised not to have believed in any of that stuff. I was, like most people, we didn't talk about that in our family life. So it was a big leap for me to try to acknowledge that at times I would be around an animal and I would think, I think I know what they're trying to tell me. And I'd sort of have this clarity that would appear. And I would just keep it to myself for probably my whole childhood. I used to, when I was a little kid, when we had dogs, and I used to get off the bus and run and take the dogs out for a run. And I was, like 10 years old, and go out into the woods. We lived out in sort of rural America, and pretend the dogs and I were a pack together. And I think I know what they thought. And I imagined this to be like, I was making it up, right? I was just being a little kid doing the imagination game. But it turns out that later on in life, I went to college, studied entirely different things, forgot about all that. I suddenly started to have these precognitions where I think, well, that horse's right front foot hurts. And I think, I wonder why I have that idea. And as so often happens when we really open our heart to something that is meant to be our path, if you will, or our mission, we get a pretty good response from source energy or the universe that gives us a little nudge of confirmation. So I would think those thoughts to myself in the past, but I started at one point to get a little braver and utter them out loud, like, wow, I wonder if her right front foot hurts, I'd say to the person standing next to me, and they'd look at me and say, well, that's weird. I was just at, the vet's yesterday, and they think there's something wrong with the right front foot. How did you know that? And I thought, that's odd. I don't really know how I knew it. So I guess when you start to get little nudges along your mission, along your path in life, all you can do is say, I don't need to understand this because it makes no sense. Maybe the best thing I could do is acknowledge it and go with it. Like, say yes instead of no. And the only thing I'm going to give myself credit for was a little bit of bravery that way. I tried hard to take myself seriously without really talking about it with anyone else and just quietly studying this idea. Am I getting messages that are actually sort of trackable? So then I started to test it. And, I would say to someone, gee, your dog seems like he's itchy, is he? This would be a friend. We were at their house for dinner. And they'd say, well, how did you know that? And I would just say, oh, I don't know. I just thought maybe he was itchy. And they're like, yes, we're struggling with the itchiness. Right. And then the next picture would be a picture of like the dog eating out of a bowl. And I'd say, well, did you change his dog food or anything? And they're like, yes, actually we did, And I said, maybe he's allergic to something in it. Did you talk to your vet? So then a couple months later, that person would say, you mentioned that. We actually followed up on it and we changed the dog food and the itching stopped. A simple thing. But I didn't say much about it. I didn't say, oh, I have this vision. I just, so anyway, I got to kind of be known as the person that had these little ideas in this group of friends. And people started to phone me and say, would you come over and look at my dog? Or can I bring my horse over? Or I live in a rural community where there's a lot of that, where people compete animals. So they're in tune with them. They didn't perform quite as well as they did last week. And, with the rodeo or at the jumper show. And I think something's the matter. Do you have any ideas? So I didn't charge for this. And I just took myself to be sort of a study subject because I realized the more I did it, the better I got. Like anything, right? Practice, practice, practice. Have faith in yourself. Have faith in anything intuitive that you think. Our brains are pretty amazing and each one's pretty unique. So just because my third grade teacher said you can't talk to animals doesn't necessarily mean that's true. I have a unique ability to be very intuitive and empathic, like so many people. And so I started to focus it on what I loved. So, you know, whatever it is you love, if you focus your empathy and compassion toward it, it can easily grow into something much bigger than what you would imagine. And I've come to totally believe that. I don't think my ability to do this is actually all that unique. And I think a lot of my clients that phone me already are on the right track. They're actually looking for just someone to give them a little confirmation and a little confidence and a couple of, you know, professional nudges to get the situation clarified. But they often will say to me in the appointment, you know, I had a feeling with what you were explaining now that I already knew that. And so I think that this idea of intuition and kind of doing heartfelt thinking instead of always brain felt thinking is nothing new about it in the world. And I just decided to study it and take it seriously. It's kind of a long answer, but it was a long process. It took a couple of years until I finally discovered that, you know, people were starting to crowd my day with requests for help. And I finally thought, I'm going to have to turn professional. And then, of course, I was terrified. I sort of had imposter syndrome where you think, oh, I can't do this. I should, you know, I can't charge people for this. Are you kidding me? But the more I did, the more I realized that I had to do that because, you know, I was getting 3-4 calls a day, and it turned into a job. Within probably 2 years, I was full-time doing more and more of this. And then I found that people said, well, you've helped me so much. So my mother lives in Massachusetts and you're here in Florida, but she's having trouble with her dog. Do you know anyone that does this in Massachusetts? And I'd be like, I don't, I'm sorry. And they'd say, well, do you want to take a crack at it? And I, again, didn't know I could do it remotely. In other words, I wasn't in the presence of the animal or the person. So I said, well, I won't charge you and I'll give it a try. And that proved to be game changing because it was easier actually when the animal wasn't with me to see the pictures and hear the ideas with more clarity than I had done so when they were in my presence. When you're trying to use something that is really a heartfelt idea, it's hard to not be judgmental of yourself. Like, say the dog limps in and growls at you. You know, he looks crabby, he's uncomfortable. You know, it doesn't take, you feel like you're cheating if you say, well, I think he's unhappy. You know, it's like, duh, he's unhappy. It's pretty obvious, right? But when you're on the phone and that someone said, hi, I'm just calling you about my, you know, my poodle, he's had a change of behavior. I don't want to tell you much, but can you tell me what you're picking up? And I see a picture of a dog looking really crabby. And, you know, I'm not anywhere near him. And I start to just channel. I think they're really upset. They're crabby. They're showing me that their stomach aches, you know, and all of a sudden I start to see like the dream starts to unfold. And I have to trust that and put myself there and say, okay, I'm going to tell them everything I see. And the worst case is I'm wrong. Then I wouldn't charge them for the appointment. Best case is I'm going to shed some light on this. And that's how I try to approach each appointment. So then that became, because you have to sort of filter out your judgmental self. You know, that you walk in and the dog is growling and crabby. So you make the judgment, well, of course, you can, you know, dogs, you can see he's unhappy. You're not really getting a psychic idea. You know, you're an imposter, right? All that went away. Or the owner is, you know, looking upset herself. Her husband's mad that they're even coming to somebody so squirrely as me. This is a stupid idea. They march in the office. They're not really happy to be there because they're upset. They feel vulnerable. Then I'm going to tell them something's wrong. I don't have to filter any of that out anymore because it's long distance. She phoned me, so she's giving me permission to speak to the essence of herself and the essence of her animal, and off we roll. So all those human encumbrances, my own, as well as the clients, are gone in the remote work. And then it got a lot more fun. it's a stretch for a lot of people to call an animal communicator and invite them into their relationship and have faith that, they're going to tell them what they see and whether or not they should really even believe the information. It goes against a lot of people's ingrained belief system. And I am really respectful of that. It doesn't faze me. It doesn't upset me. I really understand that. I felt the same way when I first started. It seems a little bit incredible. But then the more I did it, the more I would speak to, especially someone like an experienced horse person. And I'd say, I think your horse is having like a real problem with the saddle that you just had custom made for a lot of money for the horse, because it's, a nice horse that jumps fences and it hates how the saddle feels. And I would go on to describe, when the horse lands from the jump, the saddle feels like it's pinching. And then the person would laugh and say, oh, it's what I told the saddle maker, and they didn't believe me. So often people have already had the intuitive hit themselves. We, I think, as a culture, are not good at taking a hold of intuitive thoughts and believing them.
So the horse EQ, goodness, animal EQ, goodness, so communicating far away. But definitely some interesting stuff, though, how you're able to actually communicate better with animals remotely. Like, that's kind of interesting. So with the whole remote communication with animals, how, like, with that, do you ever have a time where the animals reach out to you?
Yes. And that's a little strange. When that first started to happen, it was a cat. The first one that did it was a cat. And I woke up in the morning and I'd been in the sleep. So that's kind of a meditative state somehow. And I thought a cat was here sitting on the end of my bed a few minutes ago in my dream. And he told me what was disturbing him about his home life and that I had to do something to fix the relationship with him and the man and his person, because this person was super stressed and wasn't taking care of themselves. And the cat was freaked and you got to help my person. And then he was gone. So what was interesting about that was my appointments are arranged by a third party. I don't do it myself, so I don't always know who I'm going to talk to that day. And my 10 o'clock appointment calls up and it's this man, and I don't recognize him at first. I don't know the names, or I didn't see a face. I just saw the idea of a man. And he starts to tell me that he has this cat who's starting to act really strange. And can I help him with the cat's behavior? Because the cat was acting nervous and starting to pace, jumping on windowsills, jumping down, maybe ripping down a curtain while he was jumping on a windowsill. Like what, he went from being a placid, sweet kitty that sat on his lap and was happy to hang with him to kind of this little demon cat. And so I can't remember the name of the cat now. So I tuned into the cat because I ask the person to give me the name because that's super helpful for me. And it was the cat that was in my room that night, for sure, in my dream. And he said, okay, see what I mean? He thinks it's me, but I'm trying to show him what he's acting like. So the cat, with all the bizarre behavior, was trying to show his owner, the man, that the man was acting a little crazy and pacing and being nervous. And so I explained that to the gentleman. And he started to, I didn't tell him I had a dream about his cat beforehand because I thought I would really. I was a little freaked out about that myself, honestly. Anyway, and so he started to laugh and he said, if I could only tell you, he said, I've had a horrible, 3 months, he told me his woes, big, some crises, upheavals in his personal life. And he said, I am actually feeling like that. And it did all start when I think he lost his job. I think that was the first bad thing that happened to him. And that's when the cat started to behave like a trapped animal. And I said, are you feeling trapped in your life? And he said, well, I am. I didn't have an income. I have bills to pay. That's a claustrophobic, trapped kind of feeling. And I said, well, your cat's worried about you. and he said, well, actually, I'm worried about me, and I could appreciate that for sure. So we highlighted, I can't fix his issues. It's not my job. I can't fix the cat for loving him so much. The cat wants to fix his issues. But if the human sees I have issues that are trickling down into my home, so much so that my home feels unsafe and strange for even my animals, I've got to do something to get myself together, whatever that means for him, or exercise, a therapist, a friend. I just encourage people, well, your animals feel the energy that you give off in your home in the same way that we feel energy. Like, you could walk into a party, for instance, yourself, and within a couple minutes, you think, oh, I'd like to stay here. This seems like a nice group of people. Even if I don't know them, there's a nice feeling here. Or you might think, ooh, yikes, I'm going to make my excuses and leave because this feels like an unpleasant place. Like we have a built-in system that is sort of a sixth sense, that animals have so much more of that than we do. So when we start to be really nervous, very upset or distressed in our own lives, they feel that and they can't get away from us because we are home. They don't have the option. So sometimes that will start to manifest in behaviors because they're trying to show us that you're making me uncomfortable. Meanwhile, you're wondering why your lovely dog or your sweet cat all of a sudden is acting peculiar. But it's usually a message that they feel how the energy coming off of us as stressed, and it's really stressing them. Of course, during COVID, you can imagine that was pretty pronounced. I got extremely busy during COVID with, all of us felt some measure of that, I think it's safe to say, during a pandemic. And so that's kind of the raw fear that maybe home isn't so safe. The earth isn't so safe. Our loved ones aren't so safe. And a lot of animals that were taken from shelters and placed in homes that were feeling kind of unstable took a long time to settle into homes because the house didn't feel that safe either because their person was so upset. It's an interesting way to look at your life when your animals are showing you actually sort of symptoms of your own behavior. And when we open our heart that way, and I have to say, my clients are amazingly open about doing that. They really go there with me, because they want to. They want to get more in touch with the animals that they love, that are like family members. But they also are trying to get more in touch with themselves. And it's pretty profound and beautiful thing for me to see.
That's what I'm talking about. So those online memes are true. Whereas the dogs and the cats talking about their humans. Like, yeah, my human's acting strange. I have to get them help. No, my human's acting strange. They're gaining so much weight because they're staying around the house instead of walking me around the neighborhood. Why?
Right. No, I mean, seriously, that is because, animals they say yes to what would fix them if they could. If they're stressed out and you have a dog, he'd go for a run in the woods if we lived in a world where animals could just go for runs in the woods. But we don't, right? They have to wait for us to pick up the leash, attach it, and say, do you want to go for a walk? They would do the thing that would help them feel more comfortable very often if they were left to their own devices. But, it's an artificial world we have to sort of share with them. It's not just raw nature. It's suburbia or the city or, so we take them for a 4-minute walk when they really needed an hour run with another pack of dogs, say, So they can't always understand why we, who are in control of the situation, don't do the thing that they think would make the most sense. Like, you need to go for a run, or, burn out some of this nervous energy so you feel better, or, sit in nature so you feel better. They would find secure and comfort and aid with each other and with nature. And so a lot of their dilemma is, why isn't my person doing that? The thing that they would so naturally seek out and do. So animals, they say yes to what bothers them. Yes, I'll go do that. If you walk in the kitchen and you say you want to go for a walk, and if you're looking at your husband, he might go, I don't know, I'm reading the paper, right? Or your significant other. I'll do it later with you. But you say that to your dog, you want to go for a walk? And usually they're at the door in 2 seconds because they think, well, that's a good idea. And they tend to think that's a good idea. Whereas we tend to temper everything with why we can't do it, why it's not a good time, why that won't work for us right now, but maybe I'll do it later. We don't always maybe have the privilege to prioritize what our deepest need is. We have to go to work. We have other responsibilities. We have to pay the mortgage. There's reasons for that. But it's nice when you let an animal that lives with you sort of remind you that you really have to kind of find that balance between your responsibilities and what would just be fun, what would just be play, what would just be, soothing to you. Maybe, a cat jumps up on the windowsill and just lays in the sun because he knows he needs the sunlight and it feels wonderful. We're dashing back and forth, getting our coffee, running to the phone, doing this, doing that, watching the cat luxuriate. And maybe we luxuriate at the end of a long day, if we're lucky. We get to do that. When we're already exhausted and already tired and really are not using the best sense of ourselves to do that because everybody else has used us up a little bit. The responsibilities of the day have used us up. So if you look at your pet or your animal companion, whatever you want to call them, your family member, they help you remember to just maybe say yes to yourself first once in a while.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Say yes to yourself first once in a while, indeed. That's self-care. That's right, indeed. So speaking of self, if you were to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in the year of 2021 with all of your knowledge and experience, and of course with all the animals you've communicated with, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a juicy one. Lighten up. I think I would give myself the advice to lighten up. And I still need to hear that. And I'm not 25. Take yourself a little less seriously and maybe feel like you're guided by the many things around you, that nature and animals, and embrace that more fully and love your life more that way. Instead of feeling you have to prove yourself. When you're young, you always have to prove yourself, right? And with education or with jobs or with other people or with colleagues. And I think I would skip all that phase of my life and go right to just make yourself happy. Because if you make yourself happy in a responsible way, obviously, it's because you're following your mission and you're listening to your heart. And I would say, if you had to sum it up in a really neat little sentence, I would say, listen to your heart first and your head second.
That's what I'm talking about. So lighten up, indeed. That's right. So keep the red wine around you all the time. I got you. That's right, indeed. Let me stop. That's bad advice.
Helpful. As long as it doesn't cross over the self-care line too heavily, But, I think also I would say to my young self, you wasted a lot of years not listening to your own intuition and waiting for an authority figure to tell you that how you were experiencing life was the real way life is. Instead of realizing that we're each individuals and the way we experience it with our unique brains is the real way. There isn't a stamp that goes, you're doing it right. From an authority figure that says, yes, this is it. Our authentic self usually wants some sort of strange blend that we have to find within ourselves and really explore. And I think I was a little bit of a chicken when I was young and I didn't want to explore it. I was trying to get, the authority figures in my life, bosses, teachers, parents, to say, that's it, you're a good girl. Instead of saying to myself, you're really enjoying your life and you're making a difference and you feel joy by making a difference. So you're a good girl. So I would say reward yourself and be less judgmental about where you think you might be slipping. Sometimes when we slip into mayhem, if we can go back to the book that recently came out, that is such a wonderful collection of stories, Mayhem to Miracles, the slip, the mistake, the tragedy, the accident often precedes like a huge awakening. So sometimes if you let yourself fall into that, do your best to gracefully get out of it and cut yourself a little slack, you find that inner wisdom when you connect with higher source energy, and you're well guided and you're well protected.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. So speaking of slipping, folks who need to slip into your wonderful wares and your podcast and your business, heck, even if they got pets of their own, and they're like, man, my pet is keeps on scratching themselves and comes to find out like the world is gonna end and you need to tell them that the world is gonna end. Let me stop. Let me not. It's gonna. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But in all seriousness, though, for those who want to keep in contact with you and all the stuff that you're doing now and in the future, what's the best way for folks to do so?
Well, I can be reached at my website, which is laurarowleyhealer.com. So my name is LauraRowley, healer, HEALER.com. And I have a wonderful assistant. She'll sort you out with an appointment or a workshop. I really like to do workshops where I help people develop their own intuition. I haven't gotten to do many. I used to do a couple a month. People have me fly in and work with a group of people, 10 people, 30 people, whatever they want. And I help you find that you have an inner voice and intuition, and through a lot of fun exercises with animals. And because of COVID, I haven't gotten to do very many of those. We haven't been able to go anywhere or be in big groups, but I'm looking forward to getting back into my role there because it helps other people learn how to do more of what I do, which I have a lot of fun with what I do. And I feel very lucky to be doing it. So, and I can't thank you enough for having me on. This was really lovely.
My plum please and pleasure indeed. So there you have it, folks. Head off to Laura's lovely site. It's going to be all in the show notes. Be sure to check out our podcast too for some great magical content as well, indeed, because it's some good stuff, y'all. I'm telling you, some good stuff. So, any parting words before we close up shop, Laura?
I think the only thing I would say is trust yourself in summation about anything that you feel deeply, and trust your animals to point the way. Lots of times strange behaviors are just their way of showing you they're feeling strange because you are feeling strange. And look inward, and don't be afraid to look inward. It's fun. It's not scary. It's shining a light on yourself, and we deserve to do that for ourselves. And it seems to me that animals are in our lives full of love to help us do that.
How's it going, my friend? I'm glad you made it to the end. That shows that you really enjoyed what you heard and you are an uncommon finisher. Thanks for giving this show a listen. If you really want to help out the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone that you care about or someone that needs to hear this message because we want to spread this podcast around like butter on bread if that's your type of thing. And if it's not your type of thing, still spread it around anyway because good stuff needs to be shared with good people like yourself.